We are Gold Ivy.
Our mission is to empower you to own and unleash your truth.
Stories of resiliency are gold, and ivy grows in hard places.
Those hard places are what create space for light to shine through.
You decide what works for your daily life and how to transform our lessons into your gold.
This is Ivy Unleashed,
a Gold Ivy production.
Today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Every episode of Ivy Unleashed is dedicated to empowering you to take ownership of your health. And what it really comes down to is prioritizing your mental health.
We've both seen the beauty and growth that therapy can bring and are thrilled to partner with BetterHelp to allow you the opportunity to feel heard and seen by a professional. The National Alliance on Mental Health reports that 155 million people live in a designated mental health professional shortage area, and BetterHelp is working to close that gap.
I've personally used BetterHelp and loved it because it was all online, making it super convenient. The biggest piece for me was how affordable it is. I was able to choose the therapist that met my needs. I came in with wanting to work on childhood trauma and anxiety, and it was unbelievable to see how many options I had with all the different backgrounds of therapists.
With BetterHelp, you have access to a network of over 30,000 licensed and experienced therapists. Therapy is all about deepening your self-awareness. And sometimes we can't see our own patterns and behaviors until we talk them out and get an unbiased perspective.
It's really nice to have someone who doesn't know you and has the professional background to help you thrive in your daily life. It has made the world of a difference with every relationship in my life, including the one with myself.
To get started, all you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire about your needs and preferences and choose your therapist out of the options they give you. You can talk to your therapist however you feel comfortable, whether it's via text, chat, phone, or video call. Also, you can switch therapists at no additional charge until you find the right fit for you.
The best investment you can make is in yourself. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/goldivy. That's betterhelp.com/goldivy.
Take the first step to inner peace and freedom today. Vulnerable story alert. This message is for any person struggling with the embarrassment of excessive underarm sweating and or underarm odor. I've never shared this before, so bear with me. I am a big sweater. I swear I sweat when I think. I used to carry deodorant in my purses, car, backpacks. I did not go anywhere without deodorant, and I applied it dozens of times a day. I haven't been able to wear colorful t-shirts, long sleeve shirts, or sweatshirts since I was 16 due to excessive underarm sweating. And recently, one of my armpits started to smell like onions anytime it sweat. See, I told you this is a vulnerable message, but I wanted to let you know about a treatment I found that has changed my life. This treatment is called Miradry and is for your underarms that greatly reduces sweating and odor. I have had one treatment so far, and I am a new woman. I can officially wear colored shirts without pit stains for the first time in decades, and my armpits no longer smell. I also no longer wear deodorant. I simply don't need it. Miradry uses thermal energy that targets and eliminates the sweat glands in your underarm. Let me repeat that. You just need 1 to 2 treatments. It is the only FDA-cleared treatment that can dramatically reduce underarm sweat by addressing the root cause of excessive sweat and its accompanying odor, not the symptoms. So if you're like me and have had to worry about pit stains from your sweat, excessive sweating even when resting, or planning your day around sweating, Miradry is your solution. Not only has Miradry erased my sweat problem, but also my armpit hair. I used to have to shave every single day. I am walking proof that Miradry works. Once the glands are eliminated, they will not grow back. I absolutely love my Miradry experience, and it was made affordable with a no-interest payment plan. You can find a clinic that provides Miradry all over the U.S., so head to miradry.com to see where the closest location is for you, and don't wait another minute feeling embarrassed about your body. And they have these wonderful patient concierges who will answer all your underarm questions about the treatment. Thank you for letting me share this vulnerable information with you. I am walking proof that Miradry is a life-changing treatment. Nobody should be embarrassed about their bodies, period. And if you want more information, Miradry services will be linked in the show notes, and you can also message me directly to chat more about it. And now to this episode of the Ivy Unleashed podcast. Welcome back to Ivy Unleashed. Thank you so much for being here today. Brooke and I have been waiting to talk about this topic. We have been waiting for the right person to come into our circle, and he has. Welcome to Ivy Unleashed, Professor Thomas Seager.
Thank you very much.
I wanted to call him doctor because he's got his PhD, but it's such a great thing to be proud of that you have a PhD. And so, first of all, can you tell us a little about your story and what you do for work?
Some people don't realize that my PhD is in engineering. We're in this health and wellness space. And I don't use the word doctor because people might confuse that with medical doctor. But I teach engineering classes at Arizona State University. I do a lot of research related to the environment and infrastructure. I've got, 140 peer-reviewed journal articles, classic sort of faculty research career. My specialty became resilient infrastructure systems. So I'm a civil and environmental engineer, and this is all about how do our critical infrastructure systems respond to stress, flooding, earthquake, these kinds of things. What I figured out was resilience is about adaptation. It's about change. It's not about being strong. It's not about, being big enough. It's about being agile and being able to adapt to the stress. Well, where does the adaptive capacity in any infrastructure system reside? It's in the people. It's not in the concrete, and it's not in the steel or the glass or the highways or the fiber optics. It's in the creative people who run the infrastructure. So I started getting more and more into the psychology of stress and adaptation as I was studying these disasters and this response. But then I had to look at my own life. I wasn't happy with where I was. I was in my late 40s. I was obese. My career had stalled. I had this crippling travel anxiety. I used to get calls from Europe or South America and saying, Professor Seager, would you come speak? And I couldn't do it because I was so wrapped up in the anxiety of travel. It was one of the reasons that my career had stalled out. And to top it all off, my wife wasn't happy. My marriage was falling apart. So all of this professional and this personal, it intersected. And I started thinking, when it comes to resilience, I've got to be like the N=1 experiment. How am I going to adapt? And that's when I started reading Taleb's books on hormetic stress, his anti-fragile series there about, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. The old Nietzsche quote about how our bodies as living organisms are meant to respond to stress by changing and adapting and becoming stronger. It's the opposite of machines and cars and concrete. So that was inspirational. I cleaned up my diet. I started doing some better things with exercise. I started cleaning up my thoughts. I was reading everything I could get my hands on. I lost like 50 pounds. And one of the things that I discovered was cold showers. Eleanor Roosevelt has this great quote. She says, do something that scares you every day, because it doesn't feel good until it's over. And then the next day you have the benefit of it. And there's lots of different variations of this kind of quote. There's one in my daughter's Krav Maga studio. It says, today I do what others won't, so tomorrow I can do what others can't. And it's that same mentality of, I don't want to call it suffering, but challenging yourself now so that you can be more capable in the future. And I'm going to challenge myself, but I got to tell you, cold showers are miserable.
Terrible.
They are awful. They make me angry. And I used to be in there, swearing. You're from Minnesota, and I'm sure you're very polite. So you're going to imagine, what I was saying to myself. And then comfort came back because I live in Phoenix, Arizona. And the tap water here in the summer is like over 80 degrees. You can't take a cold shower. This was maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And there's a Burning Man community that had read about Wim Hof, that was getting into breathing and ice baths. So one of my more adventurous former engineering students said, hey, Tom, why don't you come down? We're going to do an ice bath thing. And I thought, well, cold showers are miserable. I guess ice baths, up to my neck, that's got to be even worse. But I have to say yes. And it turns out that the whole body ice bath It was terrific. I mean, when you first get in, it activated me just like it activates everybody else. You think you're going to die and your parasympathetic nervous system is going like out the window. Everything is going fight or flight. And you got to strengthen that parasympathetic nervous system. You got to bring it back to you by breathing, by meditating, by calming yourself down. And I thought, these ice baths are fantastic. I'm never doing a cold shower again. So me and my former student, now my business partner, Jason Stauffer, every weekend we would get together. We'd buy like 200 pounds of ice and we would pour it into the horse trough in his backyard and we would get in there and do our thing. But the problem with Phoenix in the summertime is 200 pounds of ice will barely last you like 10 minutes. You can't get, more than 5 people through there and the ice is gone. So we're looking at this melting ice and we're saying, well, we're engineers. How hard could it be to build a machine, a bath that makes its own ice? And I got to tell you, it turns out to be pretty freaking hard because there was nothing on the market at the time. There was a company called Cold Tub, coldtub.com. And they could only get down to something like 42, 43 degrees. And we wanted ice. This is before any of us were on Instagram. The ice looks great. But before we even thinking about that, we wanted the sensation of it. What is the point of an ice bath that didn't have ice, we thought. So we bought compressors and refrigeration equipment and electrical equipment and all this stuff. We put it all on my credit card and it took some like $20,000 and we made ice. Next thing you know, some people wanted to buy it because we weren't the only ones, that had this idea. That was the genesis of Morozko Forge. The whole name of the company at the time was just 2 guys like sitting around in a backyard trying to figure out enough thermodynamics and plumbing and electricity so that they don't have to go down to the Quickie Mart and buy 200 pounds of ice anymore. And we named it this metaphor, Morozko Forge. Morozko is the winter warlock in Russian folk tales, and he will freeze you to death, if you don't have the kind of grace and respect for the cold that Morozko thinks you have. And then Forge is a place where you make metals stronger, you bend them, you shape them. So Morozko Forge is how to use the cold to reshape your life, which is exactly what I needed in that moment. Things have gotten a lot better for me in multiple ways since I started this practice of regular ice baths, deliberate cold, what Huberman calls deliberate cold exposure. And I had to go find out why. Because I'm a research scientist, I had to go to the library. I had to read about these things and understand the how of the mechanisms of these benefits. So I started writing articles, and I think that's probably how you found me. An article popped up on your browser, and you said, well, that's really interesting. We should talk more to this guy.
And then we saw you on Instagram sitting in the tub, just pouring out some wisdom while in this freezing bath. And we're like, this guy, he's coming on Ivy Unleashed. We're talking to him because maybe it was like 3 years ago. I had learned I was really in a dark place in my own healing journey. And I was seeing cold showers. Everyone I was reading was, cold exposure. I was introduced to Wim Hof like you were, Tom, and I couldn't do it. I got all my friends to do the cold showers who had anxiety and we talk about it, but then it just kind of went out. And now I feel like there's this resurgence of seeing everyone and their mother on Instagram taking cold baths.
I think that's literally true. I see a lot of moms on Instagram, in the cold bath.
You all know we're always sharing our favorite items that improve our health and help us feel better. So wait until you hear about this. NanoFit water.
NanoFit water is alkaline water, which means it helps neutralize the acid in your body. It's triple filtered, which reduces unwanted chemicals and toxins. It's supercharged with nanotized oxygen, which hydrates the body at a cellular level. And it's all natural, meaning there are 0 additives or artificial flavors.
My biggest reason for adding NanoFit into my routine is for the performance and recovery benefits. As a runner, a faster pace and quicker recovery is what I'm after, and this water is a game changer. I feel better before, during, and after both cardio and strength training with the added oxygen and hydration benefits.
And I'm here for the gut health and skin benefits. Alkaline water has colon cleansing properties, reduces the acid in my body, and the fact that NanoFit water is triple filtered, it's going to help with my gut health. And when my gut is on point, so is my skin.
I'm against the waste of standard plastic water bottles, but NanoFit water is in 100% eco-friendly aluminum bottles that are shipped to your door by Amazon, taking the shopping hassle out. No more water bottles taking up a ridiculous amount of space in your cart or having to carry the heavy weight into your car and home.
You're about to see NanoFit everywhere. They're in Starbucks, Kroger, hospitals, and making their way to stores near you. We're thrilled to share its health benefits with you today, so you can ship NanoFit water right to your door.
NanoFit's mission is to help you feel better, function better, and sleep better, which we all want. So head on over to nanofitwater.com to order your case. It'll ship through Amazon. And use code GOLDIVY for a discount.
Fit your lifestyle with NanoFit water. And now back to the show. So let's talk about when you did this research and you learned what actually is going on and why Wim Hof knew what he was talking about. Mm-hmm. So why is this even helpful? What is it actually doing?
There are so many benefits that it's almost like you're not going to believe it. It seems too good to be true. And so we got to think about this for a second. Our usual approach to health and wellness is we go to see a doctor, we have a symptom, the doctor gives us a pill. The pharmaceutical industry has taught us that there is one cause of one illness for which there is one cure, and it's an injection or a pill or a surgery or something like that. And that is all nonsense because we are complex systems. Everything in our bodies and our brains, our gut, it's all connected together. You can't change one thing in the body without changing everything else in the body. So the best therapies are systemic, not targeted. This idea of side effects is just silly. It's a euphemism for things that the pharmaceutical industry, made up because they can't target what they really want. And so they say, all the other things are side effects. There's no side effects. There are just effects. So next time you go see your doctor, ask them if explosive diarrhea is right for you, because these are the kinds of things that you expect systemically when you start messing with your gut and you start messing with your antibiotics, your microbiome. There are some things that work on the whole body as a system. Exercise is one of them. Exercise makes you smarter. But figure that out. Your brain wasn't doing push-ups. So how do you get smarter doing it? Because it helps everything in the metabolism. It helps everything in the body. It lifts your mood. Well, how is that possible? Because a real therapy will help every dimension of your wellness, including slowing aging. Cold exposure is just like that. It fixes your metabolism. It resets your nervous system. It works on every aspect of your body to the point where people who are still caught up in the pill paradigm think, well, that's ridiculous. Wim Hof is a crazy Dutchman. Nobody should take advice from him. And this Seager, he should go back to civil engineering or maybe something that he earned a credential in and stop trying to tell us how he, lost a lot of weight and changed his life and made it all for the better. And those people are full of crap. Because one of the first things that happened was Jason's wife, Adrienne. She grew up in Florida. She moved to Phoenix. She didn't know why she had Hashimoto's thyroiditis. She didn't know why she was on some, 8 different prescription medications and a special diet and had all of these autoimmune disorders manifesting as allergies and thyroid and obesity. And the last thing she wanted to do was get in the cold because she's one of those people who hates it. Her first ice bath didn't even last 8 seconds. But she sees her husband doing it. She sees me doing it. And she's like, there's got to be something to it. I don't want to be left out. I will give it a try. So one of the first things I had to look up in the library is, where did Adrienne's Hashimoto's go? She lost a ton of weight. She looks great. And she came back with a lab report that was entirely clean. Her medical doctor told her she was going to be on these meds for life, that Hashimoto's is a progressive, irreversible disease. But the studies say that the brown fat in your body that is responsible for cold thermogenesis is more than just a heat producing organ. It is also a secretory organ. That is, it makes hormones that influence, guess what? The whole rest of the body. And one of those is thyroid stimulating hormone. Growing up in Florida and then living in Phoenix as an adult, she had no brown fat. 90% of people by the time they're 40 years old have no, it's higher than that. It's like 99, but I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt, have no detectable brown fat by the time they reach the age of 40. And why would they? Because we stay in our climate controlled environments. Even in Minnesota, you got like those sidewalks that, connect the second floor.
Skyway, I think is what you're looking for.
You can go underneath the tunnel through the street. You don't have to put your skates on if you want to cross the street. Even in Minnesota, there are environments where you never have to go outside and feel the cold during the winter if you don't want to. And that means your thermoreceptors in your skin never send your brain that signal to activate your brown fat, start that thermogenesis, and your body responds by deleting brown fat. This is why people don't have it. When you activate yourself with the cold, the brown fat begins to come back. Your body has mechanisms to take white fat cells and beige them. How does it make them more brown? It adds mitochondria. It packs them with thousands of mitochondria, and they become a fat burning cell rather than a fat storing cell. They also produce thyroid stimulating hormone. So if you suffer from a thyroid dysregulation, get yourself into keto, get some sunshine, get some cold to restore the brown fat to your body and re-regulate your thyroid. This is what worked for Adrian. We wrote a couple of articles, and it was the first time that I connected the miraculous experience of the cold, because without an explanation, we're like, well, this is a spontaneous remission. It's a miracle. To the reliable scientific studies that say this is what's really going on. And that started happening over and over again in the area of sex, reproductive health. Cold exposure is one of the best things that you can do. In sports performance, everybody is doing their ice bath to recover. They got the sore knees. They want to reduce the inflammation, and that's fine. But the best thing you can do to boost your sports performance is get cold beforehand. Again, the studies have shown, the people are telling me, Tom, I feel great. I just did 25% more. I set a new personal best on the dead, or whatever it is. People are telling me they have this great experience. The studies show huge output boost in muscle peak power, and delayed fatigue or increased endurance comes from cooling either before or during your workout. So if you get sports performance and you get better sexual function, reproductive function, and you get improved mental health, and you get greater longevity, now it changes your attitude about what are you doing in the, there's a reason why it still doesn't feel good, but you remind yourself, I'm here because I want these things. I want these things for me. I want them for my kids. I want them for my family. I want everything that comes as the result of this discomfort. And you got Eleanor Roosevelt cheering you on, telling you to do something every day that scares you.
It's like delayed gratification, right? I think about the reason that a lot of people might be obese or not have the great mental health because they won't sit in that discomfort. They want to grab the quick, easy dopamine hit. And when it comes to the ice bath, the cold shower, you feel so good getting out, but you got to go through the pain first. And when I did it, it was for anxiety. And I noticed a huge difference. And I feel like a lot of our listeners, that is something that they struggle with. So will you speak specifically on the mental health piece and what it really does for anxiety, depression, mood?
There are some great studies about depression. And we're not talking about low mood. We're talking about clinical depression that is resolved through what's called winter swimming. So this is mostly coming out of the United Kingdom, where these groups of people will form. Now, during the winter, it's cold and it's gray, and the UK, you don't get enough sun, your vitamin D goes down. There's a lot of reasons to be depressed. Maybe the food's no good. I don't know. But people feel down. And so they get a group, it's social, that's a plus for mood. They go down to the beach, it's outdoors, that's a plus for mood. There isn't enough sun to really make vitamin D, but the sun exposure, like through their eyes, that's a plus for mood. And then they go in the water, and the water is cold. What happens then is they get a 2 to 3 times boost in their dopamine. They get a huge boost in norepinephrine. These are the same hormones that are responsible for passionate love. You cannot be depressed when you've got like 2, 3 times the dopamine and norepinephrine. Like, it's chemically impossible. They come out of the water and they're shivering and they're cold and they're like, I feel great. Let's do this again next week. There's one other benefit. When you are outdoors and you get into the water, you are electrically in contact with the earth. You are grounded. In the United Kingdom, they call it earthing. It improves your circulation. It reduces clotting in your blood. It improves the viscosity. It improves the blood flow to the brain. So you have all of these things going on in winter swimming. You say, well, that's great, but I live in Arizona. I'm nowhere near, the English Channel. What am I going to do? We designed the forge so that you get the grounding. If you got to add a red light or something to get some phototherapy, especially for recovery, do that. If you got to do it, make it social to lift your mood, well, that's fantastic, because I'm always at my best in the ice bath, when I have an audience or when I'm cheering somebody else on. And if I didn't mention, we've grounded the forge. You can get the same electrical benefit on my, balcony. It's right out here in my apartment that they can get in the studies that are resolving major depression using winter swimming. And it's not just social. It's not just electrophoto. It's the biochemical. It's the way your body is programmed to expect being cold. Our ancestors, it happened all the time because it was called winter. And some people ask me, but what about the people who grew up, who lived, whose ancestors from warm equatorial climates? Should they get cold? And it was a real stumper for a while. Why is cold so good for everybody? And then it hit me. Where does Wim Hof take his new trainees? They do their thing in Poland or wherever they are, and then they want to make a big splash on Instagram and do something dramatic. So they strip down to their shorts and they climb Mount Kilimanjaro. Mount Kilimanjaro is at the equator in Africa, where the oldest human fossils have been found. This is like the Garden of Eden, the cradle of like the emergence of the Homo sapiens species. There are 4 glaciers near the equator in East Africa. During the Ice Age, those glaciers dominated human habitat. Our, ancient grandmothers were pushed to the edge of the glacier down by the ocean. Our ancestors were aquatic, not like chimps, not like orangutans or, other great apes. We have downward facing nostrils. They don't go out, they go down. And that's so when we dive into those cold waters, looking for clams, looking for fish, looking for things to eat during the Ice Age, the water doesn't get forced up our nose. We have subcutaneous fat, a guy like me a little bit more than some others, but dolphins have subcutaneous fat. Chimps don't have it. Gorillas don't have it. Why do we have more in common with these aquatic creatures like whales and dolphins than we have with the apes? Our babies are born knowing how to swim. Giraffe babies, they can walk, but our babies can't. They swim because our ancient ancestors grew up near and in the water. They waded, they foraged, they dove, they swam, they birthed in the water, and that water was cold. Then it all came together for me. We are designed by our evolutionary biology to expect cold, the same way that we're designed to expect exercise, the same way that we're designed to expect seasonal, nutritious foods. When we don't get the things that were evolutionarily, expected, and I love my heated seat. I know you do too. Like you get into, your car and you hit that button and you're like, oh, this is great. Ancient ancestors, and they're at Plymouth Rock or wherever they are, if they could have had a heated outhouse, they would have taken it. But it didn't exist. The technology is disconnecting us from the environment that our bodies are evolved to expect. And when we become disconnected like that, we get sick. And it's not like an acute sickness. It is a chronic degradation that catches up to us as we age. The key is to correct our environment, to put it in agreement with our evolutionary expectation.
Oh, that is so interesting. I've never thought about the way our nostrils are angled. And something that actually came up for me when you were talking was like, I've never felt more human or like an animal until I gave birth. I've given birth 3 times. And what's so interesting, I never would have expected this, but when I was in labor for the first time, I wanted to be in water. And I never thought I would want that, but I signed the agreement just in case if I would want to use it. And the whole time I labored, I wanted to be in water. I like hate water. Like,
Did you do it?
I was in the birthing tub. It actually relaxed me so much. So my contractions slowed down. So I had to get out. But it's so interesting that you say that like your human nature and those like instincts it's totally around water.
So why, when we get in this cold water though, we want to get the heck out?
Why does it feel like, oh my God, this is freezing, I'm going to die? That's a great reaction. I've never given birth. I know this might surprise you. I did my doula training. I was there for my wife when she was giving birth. And I got to ask you this, was it scary?
Oh, giving birth or being in the water?
No, giving birth, not the water.
Giving birth was terrifying. Actually, my midwife said to me, "What are you afraid of?" And I was like, am I acting weird? Like, I'm afraid of this. I don't know what I'm doing.
You're afraid that you're going to tear. You're afraid that you're going to feel pain that you can't stand. You're afraid you're going to do something that hurts your baby. You're afraid that you're going to die when you're giving birth. And I don't know the why. Why are we wired this way? There's some questions that science can't ask. Science is really good at how, and it's really good at what, but it's no good at why. Why are we even here? We don't know. But what we do know is some things that are so natural to us are also the scariest things that we could ever do. I remember asking my wife out, before we met, we're going to very natural thing, right? I come from a long line of people who have, gotten married and had kids, and like, why should this be so scary? I don't know, but it is. Life and the things that come naturally to us sometimes scare the hell out of us. And the ice bath is one of those things. I haven't found the woman yet who is ready to try a cold water birth, but we have a lot of women who've written to me, some whom I've coached through while they're pregnant and they're doing their cold exposure. They see huge benefits. Turns out there's some really good epidemiological studies about heat, bad for pregnant women, bad for conception, bad for sperm production, bad for reproduction in general. But cold, the more cold, there's like 1 million women in China whom they enrolled in this study. The more cold they got, the better birth outcomes. So I asked the women that I'm in touch with, how are your ankles? It was great. I felt like I could run, I felt like it. And this is late in their pregnancy. The swelling was way down. Well, of course it is. Because the cold is so good for vasoconstriction. It's so good for inflammation. It's so good for the metabolism. And pregnancy is the most metabolically demanding thing that a human being can go through. So I've heard from and I've talked to a lot of women who have sort of dared to use cold exposure while they're pregnant, but not one yet who has said, I'm going to give birth in the cold water, just like my great-great-great-grandma must have. It makes sense to be in the water. Something instinctively in you is in touch with, I'm going to call her Eve. She's got the problem of trying to birth this baby with this enormous brain through this tiny pelvis that walks upright, unlike all the other primates. And what is she going to do? She's going to find the comfort of the water that spreads out the pain of the contractions, that eases the birth. And that child is coming out knowing how to swim, which is the most amazing thing for us to find out. We got some great videos on this. And the kids, of course they hold their breath. They've been in amniotic fluid for their entire life. They know what they're doing. And they come up and then they start to take their first breath. It's remarkable. It is miraculous.
It's so interesting to think about. Wow. Yeah. just human beings, just what our body can do. And I love that you're so in tune with the research, like, the science behind this, which is amazing. And it's just like anything else. We can know all of these benefits, but like Brooke is getting to, like, it's uncomfortable, so we don't do it. But I want to think about, how people can get this started. Like, maybe they can't afford to buy an ice bath right now that has all these thermodynamic properties, but would just taking a cold shower, like, how long would you take a cold shower for in order to get these benefits? Or how could you kind of get started playing with this?
There's a rule of thumb. I coined it, so I'm going to share it with you here now. Go cold enough to gasp and long enough to shiver. Everybody is different. There's a great study out of Denmark. They measured brown fat in winter swimmers. And then they asked the swimmers, well, how much winter swimming do you do? And they said, oh, I go in there once a week, or I'm in there every day, or what. And they averaged it all out. And they found out that these winter swimmers that have measurable brown fat, they averaged 11 minutes a week. So what shall we conclude? If you're getting 11 minutes a week of cold exposure, that's probably enough to keep your brown fat and your metabolism healthy. We don't know what the minimum effective dose is. We don't know, what would 8.5 minutes, but what about the temperature? And these are experienced winter swimmers. So if you're talking about a beginner, it doesn't really correlate with a group of experienced, Vikings out on the fjord or something like that. Where should I start? Here's your rule of thumb. Go cold enough to gasp and long enough to shiver. So what does that mean? When I step into my forge, I experience the gasp reflex, and it makes a lot of sense. It's that activation of the autonomic nervous system. As soon as your feet hit the water, some part of your brain is like, we're going to drown now. That's it. You better suck it in and keep it, because you're going to need that last breath. So that's one. As long as we go in feet first. If you were to go in face first and experience the the gasp reflex, you just might suck in a bunch of water. So we're wired a little bit differently for when we get cold water on our face. The dive reflex says, it's too late to gasp. You're already in, buddy. We're going to bring your heart rate down. We're going to shut down the metabolic systems to conserve oxygen, to slow down the rate of CO2 production so that it doesn't build up in your bloodstream as fast. Now you can go dive for that, lobster or whatever it is that you're trying to pull out of the water and feed your family with. So we have these two things: the gasp reflex, which is preparing you to run or swim or whatever you need to do to save your life, and the dive reflex, which is preparing you to go deeper in the water. And they can be in conflict. So there are three things that can happen to you if you're going to start with the ice baths. Never mind cold showers, I'll get back to that. If you start with the ice bath, the first thing is drowning. You do not want to, Jim Morrison this. Like, the baths in general can be dangerous, and people have drowned in them because they're high, because they're not sober. So ice bath sober. Supervised kids for the same reason. You don't want your kids around water unless they're supervised. Everybody talks about hypothermia, and it's not as big a deal as you think. What's really a big deal is called after drop. It takes like an hour to really drop your core temperature. But things before hypothermia start. Brain fog is one. Another one is loss of dexterity. So I made the mistake, 14 minutes in the ice bath, and then I came out and I was going to go do my hot yoga exercise. I got this all figured out, thermal contrast therapy. But when I came out, I couldn't drive. I couldn't operate the clutch or the stick because I could barely, hold my hands steady, and I wasn't thinking for anything. And so I had to re-warm in the sunshine. Thankfully, it's, Phoenix, Arizona in the summertime, before I could get myself to hot yoga. There's a phenomenon called afterdrop, and it's more serious than hypothermia. If you're going to do something stupid like, operate a motor vehicle, give yourself time to re-warm so that your dexterity and your brain comes back online. Those are two things that are pretty important: drowning and afterdrop. But this third one, part of the research on depression in the United Kingdom also looked at heart arrhythmia. Another way to say it is a heart attack, an irregular heartbeat that results from what they call autonomic conflict. If you activate the gasp reflex and the dive reflex at the same time, in theory, you are giving your heart the signal to speed up and slow down. And that's confusing. Now, for most people, not a problem. But if you have a heart issue, how do you mitigate the risk of this autonomic conflict? According to the scientists in the United Kingdom, breathe. And that's exactly Wim Hof's advice, because the breath is at the intersection of the automatic and the voluntary. You know that if you start running, you'll start breathing heavier without even thinking about it. You also know that you can take control of your breath and take what used to be automatic and make it voluntary until you can't hold your breath anymore. When you breathe and you structure your breathing and you make it conscious, you take control of parts of this autonomic nervous system that otherwise would be running amok throughout your body. Go in feet first, be sober, and breathe when you're in your ice bath. You're going to feel that gasp as long as it's cold. And you might not start shivering until you get out. A lot of people are in there and they're totally comfortable, but then the after-drop kicks in and they start shivering a little bit and that's fine. Go cold enough to, at some point during your experience, shiver, and you know you've activated your brown fat. If that happens to be 30 seconds at 60 degrees for you, start there. Work your way down in temperature and longer in duration. I was talking to Scott Carney about this. He wrote the book about Wim Hof, What Doesn't Kill Us. He wrote another one called The Wedge. And we were shooting the breeze about ice baths. He says, at 39, I just don't feel it anymore. It's like Scott has a lot of experience with ice baths, and I've experienced the same thing he has. If the thermometer reads 40, I'm bored. I got to get it down to like 35, 34 to really frighten me and get that gasp reflex. But if I were to go 2 weeks without doing any cold exposure, then 44 would seem like, oh my gosh, that's really cold. And Scott says he has the same kind of experience.
So work your way to it. What is the minimum that you could go where it is the borderline hypothermia, or does that limit not exist?
Everybody's different. I'm going to tell you a story about a girl with cerebral palsy, and you wouldn't know looking at her. I mean, she might be a little off balance or a little more clumsy, but she has been through hundreds of hours, thousands of hours of like full-time therapy. The doctors told her mom, you better buy a one-story ranch because your daughter might never be able to climb stairs. And this girl is amazing. She goes hiking. She's like not exactly an athlete, but entirely coordinated. She saw me doing the ice bath and she asked her mom, hey, could I try? Mom's like, well, sure. Put your foot in or your hand, whatever you want to do there, dear. She put her feet in and it felt really good, because she doesn't have the same sensation from the waist down that you and I take for granted. And she was feeling something different. She liked it. Mom, can I go in a little, can I go up to my waist? The mom's like, I guess that's okay. Can I go in up to my armpits? Well, I don't know. I'm a little worried. Tom, what do you think? I think it's fine. Kids got a lot of brown fat. Guess what? They know when to get out, So this little girl, she was 9 when she started. She was 12 when she did 30 minutes in the ice bath, and her mom pulled her out. She said, I heard Joe Rogan did 22. And the heck with that, I'm going to do more than Joe Rogan. And so because she feels it different, for her, it's the kind of feeling that puts her in touch with parts of her body that she doesn't ordinarily, communicate with. She didn't want to get out at all. When the after drop hit, she could barely walk. And of course, your mom's, you're worried about your child. You're the one who took her to those thousands of hours of therapy. And you're like, have I just committed like the most awful medical thing? She's worried. I don't have a sauna. I said, put her in the car, crank up the heat. We live in Phoenix. Drive around in the parking lot. Let the sun hit the car. It's going to be 160 degrees in there before you know it. And, let's get her a little thermal contrast. She loves it. You and I are not her. let's not do half an hour, or let's not even do 20 minutes, because Jocko Willnick called us up and said, hey, I saw your latest reel on Instagram, you wimp. My kid does more, or something like, there's no shame in the ice bath. The rule that we have in Morose Co-Form is there's no coercion. There's no bullying. You get in of your own volition. You come out of your own volition. And our job is to applaud whatever you have done, because everyone's on their own journey. If you can't calibrate your own discomfort, then it becomes abuse, not challenge. Start wherever you are.
So the goal is each time you get in to go a little further, but you're saying that you'll know when too much is too much. I guess what confuses me is this after drop, right? I feel like I'd be in there all right, you're fine. And then I completely overdone it. And then I get out and I have this after drop that I don't even know is coming. So how do you navigate that?
Give yourself a minute. Your body will rewarm. You are equipped with metabolic mechanisms to maintain they're called thermoregulatory mechanisms, to maintain this homeostasis in your temperature, because we're warm-blooded creatures. So you come out and you're experiencing afterdrop. Vim teaches, his horse stance. You've probably seen some video. It's wonderful. You can do squats. I've got my pull-up bar that I like to use. My favorite is the steel mace. Yeah, that's another video that's on YouTube, and I get that out there. Leo Savage taught me how to, do 360s, because I come out and I feel super. I could leap tall buildings in a single bound or something. And I want to do something with all that energy. So for me, I pick up the mace and I do my thing and I feel all macho. And the exercise helps me recover my temperature. So if you find that you've overdone it, I can't jump rope for crap, but it's a great one, for rewarming, challenging your dexterity. My daughter can't do a single push-up, but she loves the ice baths. So she doesn't do push-ups. She does squats. She does jumping jacks. It doesn't take a lot of exercise to help your body recover. And it turns out that men in particular get a huge testosterone boost when they're doing the cold first and the exercise second. And I didn't know this. It sort of happened to me. I discovered it accidentally. I came out, I'm so cold, and I'm like, I'm going to do my steel mace, and I'm going to feel like I'm a strong guy. I was getting my blood tested because my PSA, my prostate-specific antigen, it was so high, it was putting me in a high risk for prostate cancer. Scared the crap out of me. I didn't even tell my daughter. I didn't want anybody to encourage me to do a biopsy or surgery or anything like that. I'm like, I'm going to do keto. I'm going to do cold exposure. I'm going to treat this as best I can, see if I can get that PSA down, and then maybe I'll tell some people. But when I was talking to guys about their prostate, man, the stories were really frightening. So crazy things started to go through my head. So I'm going to keep an eye on this. I'm going to get the blood work done. And the whole male health panel, and testosterone's in there. It comes back. My testosterone went from 700s to 1180. And I'm in my early 50s. There's a big red exclamation mark on my lab report saying, you are out of range too high. My PSA, it came down. So I finally had the guts to go to my urologist and say, well, I think everything's cool now, And he took a look at my labs and he thought I must be juicing. He's about my age and he sees a lot of these kinds of reports and he's like, no frickin' way, this guy, He sends me back to the lab to get my luteinizing hormone checked. Luteinizing hormone speaks to your gonads. In men, the testosterone is produced in the testicles. In women, it's produced in the ovaries. Luteinizing hormone stimulates a man's testicles to produce testosterone. And if I had been taking exogenous testosterone, my luteinizing hormone would have been low. They've been like, hey, we got plenty of testosterone. No need to stimulate those testicles. So my urologist, he didn't tell me what was going on. He's like, one more test. Came back, red exclamation mark. You are out of range high. And I thought, that's weird. I go to the library And sure enough, I find a study from 1991. They didn't even do whole body. They took these Japanese college students and it was called cold stimulation. It was just like their wrist, If they did the cold stim after they did the exercise bike, luteinizing hormone down, testosterone down. If they did the cold stimulation and then did the exercise bike, luteinizing hormone up, testosterone, it turns out the order of things is really important. So I wrote this article, I put it out there. Joe Rogan cited it. He goes, now I get up in the morning and I do my cold before my workout because this guy on Instagram posted his lab results and said he gets all this testosterone from it. I started to hear from other men. This guy in Massachusetts, he's in his mid 60s, so he's older than me. And he says, hey, Professor Seager, I really like what you got there. So I decided to get my testosterone, checked too. I'm at 1240. He's higher than me. I go, well, what are you working out? He goes, I go down to the pond, I go swimming, and then I power walk home. I'm like a soccer mom. Is that it? He walks a mile. It doesn't take a lot of exercise. Do your cold. And if your after drop is kicking in and you feel like you overdid it, get your exercise and use your bodily mechanisms to rewarm. Here's what's going to happen. There's one study in women, and they didn't even use exercise. It showed that cold stimulation could boost testosterone in women. And what happens when testosterone goes up in women? Libido goes up. Body composition gets leaner. All of the same things that happen in men also happen in women, and they generally improve the quality of life. But women will say, but I don't want hair on my lip. I don't want a beard. I don't want to look like a dude. You are not going to look like a man. Testosterone is the dominant sex hormone in women, just like it is in men. But you don't think it, because when you get your labs back, there's estrogen and there's testosterone. They are reported in different units. The estrogen number is higher only because the units are different. And so women think, oh, I'm a woman, I must have more estrogen. No, healthy women have 3 times the testosterone than estrogen. We both need testosterone to stay healthy, to stoke our libido, to feel confident in our bodies. So get your cold, get your jumping jacks, and then I'm going to leave the rest up to you and your husband, whatever you want to do with it after that.
Ladies, grab your partner, get in the cold plunge.
It's so interesting. I just love this. I keep thinking just like learning and knowledge can change your life, like knowing these things that a lot of us, if you just take a different route in school, you never really learn these things. Or if you didn't really pay attention in health class.
Or if you never got sick and had to learn these things to take your health back. If you weren't forced to learn them, 99% of us, that's woo-woo-y. I won't do that. But when they're faced to want to feel better, right, then you're open to it, or you hear a friend did it and you're like, oh, let me actually learn more about that.
There is a problem with my profession, with science. Everybody's looking for that randomized, double-blind, controlled trial with a P of 0.05, 95% confidence interval in the statistical ensemble. And then they say, well, that must be true. No, it isn't. That's just a statistical likelihood out of a study. The question is, are you in the 95% or in the 5%? And you don't know until you try what's in the study. These statistical ensembles, they're really good for what's the next experiment you might want to try. You might see a benefit like the people in this group did, but they say nothing about who you are. Because you are a lone individual, not some statistical likelihood. So the problem with science is that we overlook experience. We do all of this experimentation and we gather all the statistics, but then somebody comes along like Dean Hall, who cured his lymphoma by swimming the entire length of the Willamette River. Talk about keto and cold exposure. He went in a cancer patient and he came out in complete remission. Now, people will look at that. Well, that's not scientific. That's N=1 experience. But aren't you curious? Because I'm curious. And I went to the library And I read Thomas Seyfried's book on cancer as a metabolic disease. And I read how cold exposure inhibits tumor growth. And I read how ketones will inhibit tumor growth. And I read Dean Hall's account about how he was shivering and he was on the verge of hypothermia and his medical team was so worried about rewarming him. He was cold exposure and ketones and his cancer resolved. I want those experiences because there's reliable knowledge. No statistical study is going to deny Dean's experience. The best thing we can do is merge the experience. Adrienne reversed her Hashimoto's. Dean resolved his cancer. And now we go and we try and understand the statistical studies that tell us these are the mechanisms by which that might have happened. We don't know if that's right for you. That's not medical advice. But when you meet a friend and a friend has had success, you might say, how would I try that? In what ways could that improve my life? Could that fit in for me? I'm going to give it a shot and see what happens.
I want to go take a bath right now.
Yeah, I'll be right back. Tom, you gotta get us a plunge.
Yes. It's so exciting to think about just what something so simple could do for your health and your life, especially, we all have someone that we know is sick. Listen to this. Go try this thing.
Well, what's so interesting to me, and I'm curious, Tom, your perspective. So for me, my inflammation is so high because I'm healing. And long story short, for years, I was infested with parasites and I didn't know. So it did a lot of damage, tissue damage. And so now it's gone and I'm on the road to healing. And my doctor I'm working with is, we got to get this inflammation down. Because of that, I've been in a chronic state of fight or flight for so long. So I think about going in this plunge and thinking about activating my nervous system even more when really what I need to do is calm. So how do I rewire how I view that of this is going to be good for my inflammation and my nervous system?
I like the way you're asking the question because the story you tell yourself is so much more important than the experience you're having. There's this great book by Stanford psychologist Kelly McGonigal. It's called The Upside of Stress. And she's got a famous TED Talk. Her courses at Stanford are very popular. She's quoting the research that says people experience a lot of stress. And if they believe that that stress is killing them, it does. They have shorter life expectancies. But the people who are in the high stress category, who believe that the stress is good for them, they live the longest. The upside of stress is, wow, this is uncomfortable. I'm here for a reason. I'm doing this because I want these benefits. I feel so good when I'm done. The story you tell yourself, it originates in the brain and then it communicates to all the rest of the cells. Guess what? Your cells don't get to decide. They don't get a vote. They're telling you, we're going to die. Get us out of here. And you tell them, this is what cold feels like. Adrienne came up with that, and it's genius because the cells are kind of trying to convince your brain to tell some danger story. And your brain is going to override that. And you say, hey, Toe, this is what cold feels like.
This is okay.
Yeah, exactly right. If you were trying to calm your child down, you would say, we're here to buy shoes today. This is all that's going to, or whatever it is. I don't know. Whatever the thing is created an anxiety in your child, you say, that's not happening, that's not happening, that's not happening. But then they're going to ask you, what is happening? We're going to the cafeteria, or we're going on the school field trip, or you're going on the school bus, or whatever. That's all that's happening. You're going to sit in a chair. You're going to see other kids. You're going to meet your teacher. All these experiences that scare the crap out of us, they require our brain to correct the story that the autonomic nervous system is trying to tell it to happen. Here's something that might help. I looked at PTSD, and this surprised the crap out of me. People who suffer from PTSD have chronically low cortisol. You would think that they have chronically high cortisol because they're in a high stress state all the time, but that's not what's going on. They're in a chronic low cortisol state. There is something dysfunctional about their normal stress response system that is keeping their cortisol down. If you elevate their cortisol levels. You do it exogenously, administer cortisol to their bodies right before you do a stress therapy, a standard trauma therapy. They respond better. Their trauma resolves faster. Higher cortisol primes them for the therapy that will help resolve their PTSD. All right, so now the question is, what happens to your cortisol in the ice bath? There are some studies that say it goes up. There are some studies that say it goes down. That's very confusing. If your cortisol starts low because you're one of those people who's carrying chronic trauma and you have chronically low cortisol, the ice bath lifts it up. If you're one of those people whose cortisol is too high, the ice bath brings it down. The ice bath modulates cortisol. It doesn't boost it. It doesn't decrease it. It modulates it so that you come into a level that primes you for, and I've never tried this, alternative trauma therapies. Here's what I have seen. I got an email today, and it's the second one in 2 weeks, saying, Professor Seager, I'm really worried. I got into my forge and I broke down crying. I don't even know what I was crying about, but tears just started coming out of my eyes and I couldn't stop it. And I got out and I started thinking about all these things. They were having an emotional flashback and they weren't aware of the experience. Like, you can have the emotions without the cognitive memory. Something in their autonomic nervous system said, we're going back to that place. We're looking for that reset of that traumatic experience. And this is 2 people in the last 2 weeks. Waterworks. It's okay. Your body is doing what it needed to do back somewhere in your past that you don't even remember. Let it do it. Shivering is one of the ways that we release trauma from our body. Peter Levine, he wrote a great book called Awaking the Tiger. He wrote another one, Unspoken Voice. In any case, he's an accomplished author and a psychiatrist, and he talks about the people who have trembled in his office during their therapy. He talks about when he got run over by a car and he was conscious, but the paramedic came and wanted to immobilize him, and he was able to speak and say, please don't, because he wanted his arms and legs to tremble so that he wouldn't get PTSD. When you get into the forge, if you feel those emotions coming up and you're going to start crying and you're going to start shivering, let it come. It's part of the experience that your body needs to reset that trauma, to help you resolve it. And you don't even have to have the cognitive memory of whatever it is that you're working on. Just remember, there's no shame. Whatever happens in that forge is your experience and your journey, and it doesn't have to be anybody else's business. I don't see them getting in there and crying their eyes out, Have some guts.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. I'm so grateful you did, because earlier when you said a nervous system reset, that caught my attention. I was like, that's what I need. Yes, I need my inflammation to go down. I need to heal and I need my energy back. But there's so much trauma of, yes, my childhood, but also healing in itself, right? Fighting to take my health back. That's what caught my attention. So if you're listening to this and that resonated with you, get a forge, get a cold plunge. But I really want to circle back to, can people start with a cold shower? Are there benefits of that if they can't?
There's a study out of Finland. There's some university up by the Arctic Circle, and they got a group of faculty there who just keep getting people cold and publishing results in these journals like, the Journal of Scandinavian Health or something like that. And God bless them, because I'm reading everything that they put out. Cold showers do not have the same effects as whole body, up to your neck ice baths. I don't want to discourage people. Like, any cold can be good cold, and you can get that testosterone boost. You can get that energy. You can get that brown fat from the cold shower, but the psychological benefits are going to be different. The heart rate speeds up in one case, it goes down in another case. Blood pressure goes up in one case, it goes down in another case. And the key is, partial body is not the same as whole body when it comes to the nervous system. So when you do whole body, your heart rate variability, which is the best physiological marker of psychological health, heart rate variability will go up. And it's not necessarily the same for cold showers. So start with the cold showers, but know that you're missing that like emotional, psychological component. Don't expect it to happen. Be in there like, well, this is going to be invigorating and this is good vasoconstriction, good for my skin. And then I'm going to do some jumping jacks and I'll have a testosterone boost. All those things are true. The emotional experience is going to happen when you go up to your neck.
Okay. So if cold showers, all you can do, 100% do it. But if you can, do the cold plunge. And now if I just get a bunch of ice, because I'm going to get the Forge, but up until I get my Forge, I can just get a bunch of ice, put it in my tub, and don't worry about it being too cold. My body will tell me, all right, you're good. Get the heck out.
You can do this in a hotel room. Clean out the, ice machine down the hallway. Fill up the little bucket that they give you and pour it into your tub and run the water. Give yourself a couple of minutes in the tub. I don't know, your family might think you're nuts, but it's like, hey, mom's going to take a bath. Leave me alone for a minute. It doesn't take very long. But my experience has been when the kids see the parents doing it, they want to do it too. And now a lot of parents are like, but is it safe for kids? Every, winter, moms are yelling, put on your hat, put on your mittens. Kids are like, I'm not cold. I'm not cold. As if they think they're going to the beach, when they're going to go out and play in the snow. And every parent thinks that they're a bad parent if they're not buttoning up their kids like Christmas Story, where he can't move his arms. Kids know when they're cold. The child who sees you in the ice bath and they want to put their hand in and they want to experiment with it like you're doing, or maybe they want to come in and sit on your lap while you're bathing. Let them. You think they don't know? They'll have the sensation. They will experience it. They have way more brown fat than you have, and they're going to be fine. As long as they're with you. Just a reminder, supervise your kids.
Yeah. No, so kids, it's okay. They know themselves. Is there any studies you found that, someone dealing with a certain condition or, certain people who the cold plunge is not for?
I haven't found the study, but we've talked about the people who are worried about heart irregularities. I've had people who have heart arrhythmia, who know they have an irregular heartbeat, and they say, well, I want to try. I'm right here with you. You're going to go in when you want to go in. You're going to come out when you're going to stay as long as you stay. So what you're really asking are the contraindications. If you know this about yourself, then don't do it. And I haven't read reliable study on contraindications for cold exposure. However, this autonomic conflict suggests that if you have a known heart condition, cold exposure is something to be more careful with.
That's so interesting. Is there a time of day that's best for you? Or is it just whenever?
Well, I prefer the time of day when the sun is on my balcony. And that changes according to the season. I live downtown, and right now the sun comes up in the morning and it's behind this skyscraper next door. And I'm like, well, gosh darn it. It doesn't come out from behind the skyscraper until 9 o'clock. I'm going to go at 9 because I want some sun with my cold. But I have a friend, he came down to visit and he does it at night. And I'm like, how do you sleep? I feel so jazzed up after an ice bath that I feel like I can't shut my eyes for hours. He goes, I don't know. I do my ice bath. I come out. I get a little exercise. I rewarm. I'm out like a light. So I don't know for sure, what the best time for you and your setup, whether you're indoors or whether you're outdoors or what's going to work. I do know that sometimes in Phoenix during the summer, I'll come back from campus and I'll be like, I got to get in again. I'm going to do 2 today because either I'm sweaty or, I'm tired and it gives me a nice lift. It's 110 degrees out. And when it gets above 110 in Phoenix, it gets hard to breathe. Sometimes having that ice bath in the late part of the day when it's peak heat is really refreshing. I've got 2 customers with multiple sclerosis. And there are something like 17 FDA-approved drugs for multiple sclerosis. None of them work as well as cold therapy do. And so one of them, she's in there 4 or 5, she's in Phoenix too. She's in there 4 or 5 times a day because it's the best way that she manages her symptoms of MS. The other guy, he's an Arizona native, but he's in Texas now. And he used to be a Navy SEAL. He was an athlete. He was quarterback of his his high school team. And the idea that he can't do the things that he used to be able to do kills him. He's got his little kids. He'll get in there anytime he wants, like the pick me up before he's going to do his workout or before he's going to go, walk through the park with his kids or whatever. The time that's right for you is the time that works for you.
Yeah. But every day, ideally?
That's what I do. And I hate missing a day. I feel guilty when I miss a day, but it's partly because I don't want to go on a podcast like this. And then you ask me, well, what did you do this morning? I'm like, I skipped. But every time I open up the lid and I look at the ice and I say, I could probably skip. Right? I mean, I don't have to, right? And then I do what Joe Rogan says. Just get in there, you wimp. Just do it. I mean, it's the same thing he said. When you hear Joe Rogan tell David Goggins, you just do it, you can't help but, I mean, now it feels like a little coercion and a little shame or something. Joe Rogan and Andrew Huberman are talking, and Huberman's like, well, this is how I do it, and I do that thing. And he goes, oh, what do you use? He goes, well, I got one of those Morosco, but it's too cold. I don't go in there. And Joe's like, just get in. And darn it, but Joe's going through my head. And I'm like, if Joe's going in, I'm going in. If he ever goes on his podcast and says, yeah, I don't do it anymore, I don't know where I'm going to find my inspiration.
That's awesome. So every day, ideally, that's what you do. I know you said exercise after, but I always see a lot of the sauna before. I've seen some after. I do have a sauna. So I'm curious what you recommend before, after.
Here's what's worked really well for me. I do my ice bath. We have a little gym in our building, but the classes are in a building down the block. So I'll go in, I'll do a couple of 3 minutes before I'm going to my yoga class or before I'm going to my conditioning class. Then I got to go down the elevator. I got to run because, I'm always late, but it's a good warm up anyway. I got to run to the next building. I got to go back up the elevator, and I get there and we're like, okay, now we're going to do kettlebells, or we're going to do, vinyasa flow or whatever the heck it is. And then I do my exercise, and that's typically an hour because that's the way these things are organized. Then I come back and I'll take a hot shower. For me, it's cold. Then it's exercise. Then it's heat. And by the time I get to the heat, I'm already warmed all the way back up. What I will not do, and I think Huberman agrees with me on this one, is go cold straight into the sauna and finish on sauna. That is, allow the sauna to re-warm me. I won't do it. And I don't really want to be knocking the people who do, because you get your vasoconstriction, you get your vasodilation. It's a good smooth muscle workout. But for me, I want that testosterone boost. I want that brown fat to really work to bring my temperature back up. After I'm rewarmed, I love the sauna. And I don't even have one. No, I have the city of Phoenix, which is almost as good, 4 months out of the year.
Totally. So you wouldn't go from sauna right into the ice bath?
If you're going to, and it's a lot easier to start with sauna, get hot, work up a sweat, then go into the ice bath. But because Joe read my stuff, he doesn't do that anymore. He wakes up, he says he's in his underwear. It's 40 degrees where he lives. He gets out there and it's terrible and it's really hard. And he goes in and he does it anyway. He says he feels fantastic after. Now you could sauna, do your thermal contrast, finish on the cold. Mm-hmm. And I hate to use this word, force your body to rewarm. Allow your body to rewarm by shivering the muscles, by working the cold thermogenesis in your brown fat, by getting some of that exercise. I think you're going to get more benefit for the time that you're putting into it. But if that doesn't work for you, remember, I'm N=1 and so are you. It's much better to just do it than it is to worry about, did I do it perfectly the way that Huberman or Seager or Rogan said I'm supposed to do? Screw that. Get in there.
I love it. It's just like anything else. It's just like anything else that you got to get uncomfortable. It's like anything else that you just got to try it, because you don't know until you try it. You don't know how good you can feel. And so I just know everybody's going to want to know where to find you, where to find your work, where to find you on Instagram, website. So can you share where people can find you, find your product, find your research?
To find the product, go to morozcoforge.com. Everybody wants to know how to spell it. It doesn't matter. We are like the #1 Google search engine result for 4 different misspellings of Morozco. You'll figure it out. Morozco Forge Ice Bath, it's going to take you to our website. There's a shop tab, like all the web. And our website's awful, by the way. We don't spend money on advertising. We're not highly ranked. We put the money in the product and the finish and like you say, the thermodynamics. We didn't put the money in the ads or the branding. You're not going to see, like as featured in the Huffington Post or some nonsense like that on our website. Go to the shop tab. It's an expensive product. Experience your sticker shock and say, oh my gosh, how could I possibly justify spending, $14,000 on this machine? I'm going to go back to the store. I'm going to spend $70 every 3 days on ice, and then do the math. And you'll be like, I think maybe getting one of those things that you plug in and you don't have to go to the Quickie Mart anymore is the way to go. You can finance it on Affirm right on the website. And I'm not recommending that you do that unless you can make all your payments in like the first 6 months. And that way I forget what deal, but if you're credit worthy, that Affirm doesn't charge you a lot of interest. That's for the product. Go to the journal tab if you want to read more about the science and experience. I write on a lot of things. As I went through my own transformation, I had to explore quite a lot of my own trauma. If you want to follow me, maybe you just want the ice baths. Go to morozcoforge.com, read the whole ice science and stuff like that. But if you want to know more about my journey, the way I do science, the human resilience, go to seagertp.substack.com. You're going to learn a lot about me, a lot of personal information. And it sounds, like this. This is the challenge that I was facing. These are the things I did that didn't work. This is what finally got me more of what I wanted in my life. Because I'm a teacher, and that's not just a job. For me, it's like an identity. It's part of my duty as a scientist. And I know I'm making up this duty. There's no like professional society that requires me to do this, but I consider it my job to try things, tell people what happened so that my readers and my students don't have to make all the same ridiculous mistakes that I've made.
Love it. We'll plug all of that in our show notes so people can find you. So interesting. I want to do some more digging, which we will here. But before we get to that, we always share with our listeners your 3 gold stars, your 3 takeaways you have for our listeners.
So here's the first one. What works in the journal article does not necessarily work for you. It might be proof as far as the peer review process is concerned and, someone else's imagination. And it's not proof until you've tried it and said, this is what works for me. Blend the science with the experience. And for almost everyone, the experience comes first. You're going to try it, or you're going to hear about it from a friend, or you're going to read about it in an article, or you're going to see it in a video on Instagram. And you don't need to know what's in the library. What you really need to know is what works for me. Some people are going to say, well, that's just the placebo effect. Well, the placebo effect is great. It's the only place where you can get benefits without any of those nasty side effects. Sign me up for the placebo effect. I don't care. What works for you might be different than what the library says. So that's one. The second one is whatever is holding you back. It's a negative emotion like fear or anxiety. And you are not going to get everything you want is on the other side of those negative emotions. You are not going to get those things you say you want if you let your feelings make your decisions for you. Mel Robbins wrote a book on this in her 5-second rule. She said, feelings are different from wantings. To get what you want, you're going to have to go through some bad feelings about it. And she says, you count down from 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Get yourself into the ice bath before your brain has a chance to talk yourself out of it. Or listen to Joe. Just do it. Just do a really bad job of it. Whatever is keeping you from what you want is going to show up like fear, anxiety, a negative emotion. Don't let your feelings do your thinking for you. So that's 2 gold stars. And I want to flip it around and ask you, like I ask all my classes, what stuck out for you? What are you going to be thinking about when we're done with this conversation?
I got to get my ass in a tub, a cold tub.
Yes. I think what's sticking out for me is kind of exactly what you were just saying, like the just do it, where, a lot of people we coach, they're like, how do you convince yourself? It's like, sometimes you just need to not think and you just need to do. Like, you need to just do it. Like, everything in your body is going to say don't, because it's uncomfortable. But don't allow yourself to think about it. You know it's good for you, or probably good for you. So just try it so that you can unlock the possibilities. Mm-hmm. That's what's sticking out for me.
One of my favorite things is telling stories about my daughter. During COVID, she went real hard on the Krav Maga. Everybody's locked down, and so she's practicing with a couple of her friends. And then the dojo or the studio, wherever it is, she reopened. She started doing her testing, and she's leveling up, and she's a teacher and stuff like that. During one sparring match in which she was grouped with people who are elevated, higher skill level than her, something happened to her knee, gave out, collapsed, and she's on the mat. And now all the higher belts are like, did we go too hard with the less experience? They feel terrible. Are you okay? Are you okay? She's on the mat, and she did something that she learned playing softball for me. That hurt piece of your body, the one that you're angry at because it let you down in the moment of competition when you really need it, it's hurting, and it needs your love. It needs your attention. She picked up her knee and she started kissing her knee. And she said, it's okay, knee. You're still on the team. We still love you. We need you to get better. And all of these like black belts were like, what's going on? What is this girl? Are you okay? She goes, I'm just giving a little bit of love to my knee. It's going to help it heal. I don't know where this goes in the gold star. What I'm saying is talk to your body. When you get in the ice bath, your fingers are going to be freaking out. Your toes are going to be screaming at you. And you might get this attitude. It's like, toughen up, toes. The rest of us are all fine here, or something like that. That's not what they need from you. Tell the toes. This is what cold feels like. This is new for you, toes. We need you on the team. Like, we're all working to get you the blood that you need to warm up. And you're going to feel better as soon as we're done. Talk to your body like it was one of your kids, like you love them and you want to support them. And I know you feel anxious, or you feel let down, or you feel all these other things that are angry or something. Use your brain to tell your body the story that it needs to hear. And you're going to feel all of those negative emotions go dissipate into the water. You're going to let them go.
I love that.
I want one.
Love
right
conquers
now.
all.
Yeah.
That is awesome. We could ask you a million more questions, but we promise we'll only ask you 3 more for our Unleashing Ivy, our rapid fire question segment. Are you ready?
Let's go.
All right. My question is, what would you say to someone who's like, Tom, this sounds great. I can't do the cold. It's not worth it.
I'm not going to try and convince people or coerce, but I can, here's an article, here's my experience, whatever. It's not for you. It's okay.
Oh, I like that.
You have to want to do it.
Yeah, I like that answer. Sometimes you're just not ready for it. Sometimes you have too much going on, that uncomfortable feeling, like it's just overload. And then sometimes you're like, okay, now I'm ready for a challenge. I like that.
There's somebody, I forget the quote, so I'm going to butcher it, but I'm a teacher. And the quote is like, you can't teach anybody anything. All you can do is create the right conditions for them to learn. Because learning is something that students do. I can't force anybody to learn. They have to be ready. If they say, Tom, it sounds great, but I can't do it, it's okay. You're not ready. When you are ready, I'll be here.
It's like that quote, when you're ready, the teacher will appear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I bet you're such a great professor.
You can look that up too. I have some of the worst evaluations ever. Don't look it up.
Rateyourprofessor.com. Is that still a thing?
Yeah, it's still a thing. I'm probably the lowest rated engineering professor at Arizona State. And imagine, here I am saying, well, you got to be uncomfortable. That's not going to help your student evaluations.
This professor just keeps telling me to get cold.
That's right.
All right. My question has to do with, just from following you, I know, and you've mentioned a few times, the ketogenic diet. I want you to elaborate on whether or not you are keto and what its benefits are.
It's hard to rapid fire that one. I go in and out of keto. I cycle in and out.
Okay.
And I didn't know a dang thing about keto until my son was 6 years old and he was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. I didn't know what was going on with him. He was peeing all the time. I thought he had the flu. I thought I was being a good dad feeding him orange juice because, that's what you do for a sick kid, right? Vitamin C. It was terrible. I was making it worse. He was hours away from entering a coma. Our pediatrician is our neighbor. My wife called him and she said, I'm really worried, this and that. And the pediatrician said, well, it's wintertime and kids get sick. And then my wife said, and he's peeing all the time. And our neighbor said, meet me at the hospital. Your son has diabetes and your life is going to change. He was in something called ketoacidosis. When your body no longer makes insulin, it can't take the glucose out of the bloodstream and put it into the cells where it can reach the mitochondria. So he was in a fat burning metabolism. It was the only thing to keep him alive. And his ketones kept going up and up and up so that it changed the pH of his blood to become more acidic. That's why he would go into a coma. They put him in the pediatric intensive care unit. They drip feed him, insulin through an IV. And it was like watching him come back alive. He woke up in the morning. This is the miraculous nature of insulin. And he said, I'm hungry. Freaking couldn't keep myself together. Said, I have to learn everything about glucose and diet and keto and metabolism. And, this is 2001. It's been 22 years since then. I went through reading Atkins and reading about mitochondria and reading everything. The reason keto has a bad reputation is because nobody wants to see their diabetic son go into ketoacidosis. And so they figure it must be dangerous. But I have islet cells in my pancreas. I make insulin. And if I don't get enough carbs in my diet, there's a process called neoglucogenesis. I might be getting that wrong, by which my liver synthesizes the glucose the minimum amount of glucose that my body needs from amino acids and other precursors. There is no carbohydrate requirement in your diet. Keto, as long as you're not type 1 diabetic, is fine. It's healthy. It's beneficial. It's part of the natural cycle that our ancient ancestors went through. And then, if it's June and you come across the blueberry patch, the hell with keto. Get all that stuff in there, We are meant to be seasonal, cyclical eaters. So my experiments in keto have always been related to intermittent fasting, going in and out. And then I'll have what I call a carb confusion day. And sometimes I'll get fresh bread or, whatever Sean Baker says is poison, whatever Paul Saladino says I should definitely never, ever eat. And but it's so delicious. I'll have a piece of toast with honey or something like that. I go in and out. And remember, N=1, it works really well for me. I went from 250 pounds to 190 pounds, and then I came back. Some of it muscle, some of it fat. So now you're looking at me, I'm at 210. You can see my videos and you can be like, what's he on Instagram for? He's no Instagram model. He should put a shirt on, And it's true, but I'm not on Instagram to sell bathing suits or something. I'm there to tell you what's going on with science. Keto works really well for me. For a certain individual, an anorexic, and I doubt you have many in your audience, but the keto diet is now a rescue diet. Because when you go on keto, it will bring down anxiety. It's called anxiolytic. Because it takes the anxiety down, it's good for the brain. Chris Palmer has a really good book on this called Brain Energy, in which he talks about, he's a psychiatrist at Harvard, and he talks about how his patients who went on a keto diet, it helped their mood and helped reduce their anxiety, and they're more receptive to therapy. For anorexics, keto is the one diet, even though people say, oh, keto's restrictive. It's the one diet that will keep them alive and bring their anorexia down. So there's some good journal articles on combination treatments for anorexia with keto. Anorexia is the most deadly of all the psychological disorders. The recovery rates are embarrassingly low. And so if you meet somebody with an eating disorder and they can use the discipline of that disorder to stay on keto, like, congratulate them. It's a healthy diet for your brain, for your body, and for some people, it might wind up saving their lives.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's the more you know, better you can do.
Yeah.
That's
You know
amazing.
what I love is I feel like you've taken your life anytime there's something that's really challenging or potentially deathly, and you've dug into science to see how you can transform your life. That is so powerful. I love it. I'm blown away by you. And I knew some of these things, but to hear you talk through it with the actual science, like this stuff works and it's transformed your lives. Like, how's your son doing?
Diabetes wise, he's now in his mid-20s. I'm no longer in charge of his metabolism. That duty passed to his girlfriend, and I knew it was serious when he accidentally double bolused himself from his insulin pump. This is years ago. And a double shot of H, it could be enough to cause you to lose consciousness. Now, ordinarily, even though he was a grown man when he did it, ordinarily, I would get a text, I would get an alert, I would get a ring or something like that. And I would say, all right, we're going to figure this one out. I didn't. I got a story the next day because his girlfriend stayed with him when he was like almost passed out on the floor, feeding him juice. And you can say, that is not the way to do it. You should be in the emergency room, kid. You should inject his butt with the glucagon that brings up his glucose level immediately. But that's not the point of the story. The point of the story was, I'm not the one he's going to go to anymore. It is the girlfriend whom he fell in love with, whom he's now married to, and they have 2 kids. And when he makes a mistake, God, he never wants to go back to the hospital. It's such a bad experience. He had at an impressionable age. He wants to figure this out with the resources around him. His younger sister had juice boxes like stored all over the house. And we would say, Emma, juice box. Boom, she would go get it because he had too much insulin or something like that. She knew exactly where they were. And so he's, kind of pre-structured his environment. And that's her job now. As far as I know, they're doing great with it. And that's the wonderful thing. Like the fact that it doesn't come to me anymore. Instead, I go on these podcasts and I talk about metabolism and brown fat and things like that. I got a little more time on my hands than I used to.
You've done your job.
That's right.
That's amazing. All right, Tom, last question. If you could go back and tell younger Tom one thing, what would you tell him?
I would tell him vitamin D. I would tell him that it doesn't matter if your son was born in October and you were living in the mountains and it was colder than hell. You get his naked butt out there in the sun as much as you can, because vitamin D deficiency during pregnancy and the first year of life in the infant is correlated with type 1 diabetes. It doesn't show up right away. It shows up later. A vitamin D deficiency will create this risk of autoimmune disorder that causes the body to attack its own islet cells so they can no longer make insulin. That's just diabetes. Vitamin D is it's systemic. It's related to your immune system. It's related to your mental health. It's related to your ability to inhibit cancer. It's related to your longevity. If I could tell younger Tom one thing, it would be get you and your kids the vitamin D that their systems need.
Beautiful. Thank you. Man, we learned so much today. I can't wait to share with our listeners, and I'm so happy we met you. I feel like
I'm looking forward to it.
There's 50 other topics we could dive into that you would know so much about. So I feel like this is not the end of our time, but we can't wait to share you with everyone. Thank you for your time in your beautiful Arizona. Oh, you can just go out on your deck right now and just get in that ice. I'm so jealous. I wish I was there. But yes, we appreciate your time. So happy we met you. And we look forward to chatting with you more.
It's a pleasure. Brooke, Andrea, thank you very much.
You're welcome. And the last thing we do is we leave our listeners with your piece of gold, a quote that speaks to you.
I'm going to leave it to Eleanor Roosevelt. Do something that scares you every day.
This is Gold Ivy signing off.
Listen to your truth and go chase your gold.